Good morning. Don't look so serious. Actually, earlier I was sitting there and I was chuckling to myself, because how many of you would say that you were born in or have an affiliation with or a sensitivity toward what some years ago would be called the hippie movement? It's okay to raise your hand. We're not under surveillance. And if we were, it doesn't matter. Because the people doing the surveilling don't know what they're seeing. The second part of my chuckle is that there are people who see, and some of us sometimes see each other sitting in these various weird positions, and we think this is inconsequential to history. And nothing could be further from the truth. I'll come back to why I brought up the hippie thing. I never brought it up before, so it's interesting to me that it came to my mind. I myself did not identify with that group in particular, but it is not that group that I want to bring our attention to. It is the time period in which that occurred. And if you look beyond that group, into the feminist group, into the civil rights group, into the et cetera, you're going to begin to see what I'm talking about in the talk today. Started to emerge then. But first, the poem. I join my hands and pray for bodhisattvas and Buddhas in every space and time to arise in this desperate hour. So many of us are hurt and are wounded by what we have endured, that sometimes we doubt the very purpose and value of our life. I invite all of us to meet the mighty ones who scatter every fear, the kind ones who offer the balm of relief to all beings, and the patient ones, guardians of wandering souls, who at home with the candle of hope still burning bright, wait for us in the dark of night. So many of us are tired and weary, our bones are aching to rest. And yes, we have seen the true frailty of goodness and in quiet hours question humanity's worth. I invite us all to enter the unremitting stream of wholesome merit, indestructible and eternal, so that even during sleep and distraction and destruction, it still flows toward the ocean of goodness. The householder life is not so easy. So many things pulling at our precious energy. family, relationship, property, work, economics, society, politics, seems like a constant theater of the absurd. And yet, this noble state of mind still courses through our veins. This holy attitude, this eternal energy of enlightenment, freeing us from the prison of a small self. I invite all of us to be our true calling, the presence of love in this world. To remember our footsteps in the snows of time shall not be repeated, and the tears, our tears, like moon drops, nourish the great pines of the earth as they reach toward the blue sky. These tears, too, are precious. I invite us all into the delight and joy of a life well lived, a song well sung, reflecting the Dharma light across the mysteries of time and space. So I'm going to say some things that will reveal that I am quite old from some points of view. And there was an old, I'm not this old, but I used to, when I was growing up, I used to enjoy, when I was a child, I used to enjoy Laurel and Hardy vaudeville TV shows where they were always getting in trouble. Okay, and when they got in trouble, at one part of the episode, near the end, one would turn to the other and say, "This is a fine mess you have gotten me into." So the world today is in a fine mess. And when many of us witness this mess, we lose heart. I said to a group a week ago, if you really enjoy being depressed, just cut on the news. It doesn't take long, and you experience all hope is lost. But we must remember that the news is a construct of a state of mind of a very few people. I have had the luxury most of my life of traveling and working in the world, in the villages of Africa, in India, in the ghettos of Calcutta and Cleveland, Ohio, where I grew up, and the west side of Chicago and Ivy City in Washington, D.C., and in the hills and valleys of Guatemala, and so on. And I say to you, this experience of most of my life, I have not seen what we see on the news. I've not heard that commentary. And I must remember the mountains of Jamaica, where I was for 3 years, having such a great time building coffee cooperatives, and roads, and schools, and health clinics. And all this time I experienced human vitality, human hope, human creativity, human community, and wisdom. My point here is none of this gets reported on the news. Across this planet, people are doing their very best for their children and their communities. All kinds of creativity is happening. In fact, more analytically speaking, in the last 100 years, more things have been invented than in entire human history. More books published. And I can go on, and it's just breathtaking what we have done as a species up to this point. None of this is reported on the news. How could this be? Well, one thing is we're all so busy that we don't notice what's actually happening. So we turn over our power to someone else to tell us what's actually happening. And so we get what we get. We get the stories being made up. And all stories are made up. Mine, yours, everybody else's. That's not a problem. The problem is when we don't know we made it up. And we think it's finally, ultimately real. We live in a hectic time, fast-paced time. When I'm working with corporations, and I dress differently for that, but when I'm working as a consultant with corporations, everybody talks about distraction and busyness and exhaustion. I talked with some people in the last month, younger than me, all of whom have quit their jobs to look for other things because they were having nervous breakdowns. Their language for that. They discovered how unhealthy their lives had become. And each of us is different. I'm aware of that. Still. So, general picture of our social process in today's world. If we had triangles up here, the economic triangle would be really big. So big that it is now defining what it means to be a human being. Across the world now, most people think what it means to be a human being, a profound human being, live a profound life, is all connected to your capacity to consume or your capacity to collect or to own. This is literally, to me, the greatest danger on the planet, is the definition of what it means to be human is being reduced down to economic categories. And we ran into this all the time doing socioeconomic development projects because all your metrics, all your ways of accounting for your achievements were economic-centric, which is okay. Economics is not a bad thing. It's how we use it. A lot of people misunderstand Buddhism because I've heard all over the Western world, we're not supposed to be in business. Business is a bad thing. That was not taught in Buddhism. The question from a Buddhist perspective about economics is how to create wealth without creating suffering. That's the question. And then how to use wealth without creating suffering. Those are the two key questions the Buddha raised in his day about wealth. Make all the wealth you can and use it wisely to heal and transform your family, your community, your society, your world. But do that without causing suffering. Psychologically, Erich Fromm had a description of the situation from his point of view that there are two modes of society, the mode of having that defines society and the mode of being that defines society. And we are caught at this very moment between these two modes of being. And when I think about these modes of being, I've spent time in villages and with tribes and indigenous peoples for whom being is their mode. And what we see when we look at history is that having eats being for lunch. There is a movie that came out, Avatar. Was that the movie? It's an example of that. That's why I brought up the hippie thing. That was all about being and love and having eats that for lunch. But is that really correct? Having thinks so. Being does not. See, having's in charge of the news. Being is not. I want to come back to that. Evolutionarily, one of the greatest insights in my life for me was that evolution is not over. I know we've been taught that we are the apex of what a human being could be in the evolutionary process. I mean, like we stand upright. We have like car keys, refrigerators, maps. But we are not the end of the evolutionary process. We are a part of the evolutionary process. And evolutionary psychology research over the last 10 years reveals that what the evolution is that's going on with us now, we're not growing extra fingers or toes or ears or whatever. Those 200 evolutionary changes are happening all inside of us. They're happening in our neurotransmitters, the chemicals that we have to produce in our brain for our nerve cells to communicate with one another and keep up with the chaos we now, our bodies and minds now experience that we have not been trained to deal with. My friend Jean Houston, our friend Jean Houston, wrote me a note. She's working on a new book. And basically, it's we're lost. We're in a time period, in a space period, and in a relationship period that no human beings have ever been trained to be in. It's like going to sleep tonight and tomorrow morning waking up in the shuttle. We don't understand any of the controls. We don't know how this thing's work. We don't even know how to turn it on or which way it'll go when we do turn it on. That's our state at this moment of the evolutionary process of our species. I just ordered a new book called Species in Denial. And this author suggests that the human journey over the last 5 million years has been a dialogue between self-destruction and self-discovery. Grace Lee Boggs, a Chinese civil rights icon from Detroit, who just passed away last year, said that her journey in the civil rights movement led her to one conclusion. And that conclusion is the issue before us is how we define what it means to be human. That's the task before us now. Part of the reason we're lost is our old categories are like crashing. I had a conversation with a group of people not long ago who they're trying to come up with like post-human categories. I'm like, what? Well, I was being interviewed by a CEO where I was going to do a consulting job, but he was checking me out first, politically speaking. And so his first question was like, are you a Democrat? I said, no, I'm scarier than that. He says, are you a Republican? No. I'm scarier than that. Well, you must be independent, libertarian, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm a human being. And that ought to really scare you. Because I am aware that I invent myself. And I am aware that I make up stuff. I am on to myself, and therefore I am on to you. And culturally, so I have to finish the political. The political process is a complete ally of economic dominance. It's bought and sold. Pat Schroeder, Congresswoman from California, in her last interview before people really got pissed off at her, someone asked her about Congress. She said, "We have the best Congress money can buy." And what did she mean by that? What she meant by that, when she was asked, is her first day of moving into her new office, that whole week, every morning, an aide would come in and say, "This is how much money you need to raise today to be reelected." And so the first thing she saw every day was how much fundraising she had to do. Not how much governance, not what the issues were that people elected her to deal with, but how much money she needed to raise so that next term she'd have the same office or a better one. So she left. I met her in Washington, D.C. years ago. She says, "I'm leaving." I met a lot of people who decided to pull out because they could see this coming. In the cultural process, the process of education and community and meaning is collapsed. And so we are lost. But it is great to be lost. Because when we are lost, we can invent what it means to find ourselves. We don't have to be victim to being lost. What an opportunity to explore, to invent, to create, to realize, oh, this might be a mistake, but that's okay, we can try it again. To step into the discipline of the scientific method of trying things out. See what works. What can we learn? What can we benefit from? So I know on the flyer, I think it says something about Maitreya Buddha. So I said, oh, that's the condition that we're in. There's a prophecy in Buddhism about a Buddha called Maitreya. And Maitreya, the prophecy says, Maitreya Buddha will appear, will come at a time when the oceans start to shift. And that Maitreya Buddha will appear when humanity is lost in transition and at constant war with itself. Maitreya Buddha will appear when there is attachment and grasping and clinging to excessive commercialism and materialism. Will appear when there is excessive grasping, clinging, and attachment to violence and dominance and power. And will appear when the Dharma has been forgotten. Forgotten how to practice it. Forgotten what the benefits are of the contemplative life. A few years ago, I was being considered, this is not an important comment, especially considered to be president of Naropa University in Boulder. And I'm raising that story because something happened during the process of my conversation with the past president, and we agreed on something, and it was that what the world needs now is high-performing contemplatives. Not just high-performing people. We got that on Wall Street and other places. We got that in banks, and I used to work at a bank, and it's not that hard. At least it wasn't for me. Anyway, what we need is high-performing contemplatives. People who practice, stop, to use Thich Nhat Hanh's language, stopping and looking deeply into the nature of things before they act. Who dare to raise the question of what might be the outcome beyond my benefit. Who do their leadership of institutions and businesses and schools and family systems and community life from a perspective of compassion. That's high-performing contemplatives. And it says that Maitreya Buddha, and Maitreya stands for, it comes from the root word in Pali, metta, which means loving kindness. And Pali is an early language in India associated with Buddhism. It means Maitreya Buddha. Thich Nhat Hanh likes to say Maitreya Buddha is Mr. Love, Ms. Love. But the other thing that Thich Nhat Hanh has encouraged us to see, and also this is true in some branches of Japanese Buddhism, but that Maitreya Buddha is a metaphor for the Sangha of Bodhisattvas who are arising from the earth at this very moment. And I always like to tell people, really pay attention to who you're sitting next to. Because you are in a room of bodhisattvas who may or may not know that's who they are. So the Buddha said 5 things. How do you know Maitreya Buddha is going to appear or is appearing? 5 things are disappearing. Number 1, people have forgotten that they can actually end their suffering. So awareness of how to end my experience of suffering, that is how I create my own suffering, because it's actually lots more convenient and fun for me to blame it on you. Okay? And not that you can't do things that I don't appreciate. But that's not what, in the deepest sense, Buddhism means by suffering. It means our individual capacity and our collective capacity to be driven by grasping, clinging, and attachment to identity. Now we're in the news. This is all about I-making. You ever seen the Muppets with Miss Piggy? It's about moi. Right? It's about moi. And in Buddhism, that is the heart of making suffering. And in society, too. And right now, there's a nervous breakdown going on in the United States while we sit here. And my grandmother knew it was coming. She used to say, don't get mad at him. Soon he'll just have a breakdown. Because this is not sustainable. This illusion of identity, this pattern of dominance, and the confusion about dominance and control and power, it's not sustainable for anybody. This is also what scares what we call ISIS. Same thing, no different in terms of energy. Second disappearance is the disappearance of practice, of contemplative practice. I used to say to some friends that modern society is anti-contemplative. Our very lifestyles don't give us time or space to stop, to reflect, to breathe, to actually pay attention to what is going on in our life. So I say to people, it's not because we're not smart enough to change our education systems. or to raise more people up out of poverty, is we're all so busy we don't have time to even think about it. It's not that we're dumb. We're super talented. But are we using that talent outside and beyond the economic definition of what it means to be human is the question. 3, the disappearance of learning. We talk to people in schools and teachers, and we work with teachers in schools all over the world, and it's just amazing. Oh, we have a budget crisis, quote, so let's cut music. And so I think to myself, well, let's cut art. Let's cut all the things we know scientifically and neurologically help people be more profoundly human. Let's cut that out. And let's put more energy and emphasis on helping people become skillful. And this is my take, I'll own my comments, that when we say science and math, we mean the capacity to create weapons. And don't be confused by that. Yes, we mean inventions in medicine and breakthroughs, but also, we used to live across the street from a university called Harvey Mudd in Claremont, California, which rivals with MIT. It's very hard to get in. And Peggy was saying, was walking our dog one day, it's like 14-year-old little guys with big heads walking around. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how their genius will be used or bought and sold. I'm talking about learning. And we will lose our symbols of Buddhism. These will start to disappear. These will start to disappear. So I was thinking about, there was just an article on the statues that were blown up in Afghanistan that reappeared. And the relics will be destroyed or forgotten. So, Maitreya arises when the Dharma is forgotten, when our profound possibility of being human is hidden. We had a chance over Christmas to go to, we were invited to a Sufi zikr event, and the master for this group on Whidbey, where we live now, was in from Turkey. And he says, all of Sufi practice is to remove the rust from our hearts. What a great metaphor. In Zen Buddhism, in the early days, they'd say, our practice is to remove the red dust that's covering up our awakening. So it is said that Maitreya Buddha has been waiting for this moment, resting in the 33rd heaven. And in Buddhism, there's like zillions of heavens, right? So, as well as zillions of hells. So, but the 33rd heaven is really, really important. It's where bodhisattvas wait until it's their time to manifest themselves. And one scholar's story about the arising of Maitreya, is another reason I brought up the hippie thing, is that 2,500 years after the death of the Buddha brings us to about 1957 in the Buddhist calendar. That's what I'm saying. All of what we saw on the campuses and in the streets, don't look at that simply as political. Somebody else looked at it as political and told us that's what it was. It was more than political. It was more scary than political. It was a redefinition of what it means to be human. based on love. There's nothing scarier than that. Openness, ability to change my mind, the ability to hold multiple points of view, not just two, multiple perspectives. It's like, well, I was going to do that, but I just learned something, so I'm not going to do that. Or I just learned something, so I will do that. Not rigid certainty. That really scared some people. Still does. So Ty's description of Mr. Love, Ms. Love, and Ty's suggestion, Thich Nhat Hanh, Thai is a Vietnamese language for teacher, is that this Maitreya, this manifestation is not an individual, it is a manifestation of a community of people. And I have seen this community of people rising around the planet. But we don't get any news coverage. So we need to start to create our own news coverage. We need to start, and many of you already know, telling our own stories, publishing our books, our poems, our music, our art. I am not going to let somebody else define my humanness. Not going there. The greatest responsibility I have is defining my humanness. Why would I turn that over to CNN? Or for God's sakes, Fox News? Why would you do that? Because for some people it's easier being asleep than being awake. It's easier having a father than growing up. Every night I wake up sometimes and I think America is basically a culture that has yet to graduate from high school. I see all this and look, my God. Well, that's junior high. It's not even the 10th grade.
Yeah.
What is, sure, let's put these people in charge. Sure, let's worship them. Let's listen to them. Let's follow them. Well, you go ahead. I'm not going. Because I already know the outcome.
Yes.
Maitreya, Buddha, which is all of us and much, much more. What starts to happen? And you're already seeing this. You've already been experiencing this since 1957. People start to lose doubt in their inability to have power. People start to recognize they have self-power. People start to recognize they can heal and transform themselves and their society instead of waiting on somebody else to do it. When I used to teach theology in the Christian paradigm, I used to really enjoy teaching the New Testament because the great scandal of the New Testament is there is no Messiah. I know you were waiting on one. But that's not all. That's not all. Okay? There is no Messiah and you're it.
Yes.
Now that's the whole New Testament. So what are you waiting for? What are we waiting for? So Maitreya Buddha manifests in training people in meditative states that can transform our neurological knots. It's not only mental and psychological. We have habits in the structure of our brains. Thank you. And contemplative practice can help rewire those habits. This is my area of research, so I'm not just chatting. Yeah. Okay? And this is what evolution is not over. And so right now, the amygdala, the part of our brain that evolutionarily is designed to protect us, it's like our neurological homeland security department, is running wild. Fear. You know, we like scared of stuff that doesn't even exist. Really? We did Thich Nhat Hanh in our community did a law enforcement retreat on mindfulness in Madison, Wisconsin, maybe 10, 12 years ago. And I have to say this carefully because I'm being recorded. Well, so let me first begin by saying I worked with the Miami Police Force for 3 years, very successfully, as a consultant, organizational consultant, which was great fun. And what I discovered then is that most police officers go for their whole career and never fire their gun, except on the practice range. And the other thing I discovered, not just about Miami, but anywhere, people who shoot unarmed people are the same people who shoot unarmed people. And everybody knows who they are, and nobody wants to go out with them. It's no different than any other kind of community or neighborhood. You know who's well and who's not well. So I did a project for the state of Florida police, for the Supreme Court, investigating the police system around the state, and my primary recommendation was to change how they studied and interviewed and tested people psychologically before they were hired. Makes a big difference. Not everybody should be carrying a gun. Right? I don't care how they work out. That doesn't mean you should have a gun and permission to use it anytime, anywhere. Why am I raising this up? Because during this conference we learned, and I won't say who said this because I don't want to get this person in trouble, but an official from a major police system in the United States said to the group, "How many policemen do you think were killed last year in the line of duty in my major city?" So there were all these guesses, blah, 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 blah. And this person said, well, 4 over the last 12 months. And do you know how many police officers lost their life due to suicide in the last year? Let's just say it's much higher. So the amount of suffering hidden in that job that nobody will acknowledge is a part of the problem. Is a part of the problem. It's a part of the crisis, as well as people who should never have that job. But it's a lot of suffering that is not being attended to, that outflows, spills out into society. So when Maitreya shows up, it manifests in helping us transform our neurological patterns so that we can move from our amygdala hijack, always feeling like we're on alert, to enriching and expanding capacity of our neocortex, the newest part of our brain up here, which some people call the angel brain. I don't know if it's all that, but the cognitive functions and more time and more neurological resources devoted to developing that instead of our primitive, older reptilian brain, which is what actually drives the news. That can be changed. There's nothing stuck about our brains. We now know this. That can be changed. So the task of Maitreya Buddha, in my view, is all about the Metta Sutta, or the Metta Sutra, depending on which transition or translation you're looking at, and it's about how to be kind. Let's just start there. Let's just start with practicing how to be kind to one another, and don't get global and ideological. Let's like how to be kind at the kitchen table. It's not so easy, right? Because it's most easy to be unkind to the people who are closest to us because they piss us off the most. They're the most irritating because they're the most constant. Okay? So how am I going to be kind to the neighbor next door when I'm still trying to figure out how to be kind to my son, my daughter, my father, my grandparents, my wife, my partner? So this fundamental practice of love in Buddhism begins with kindness. And as we practice kindness, we literally change our patterns of our brain so that kindness can move from, this is from old Bodhidharma, an ancient Chinese Zen master, so that kindness moves from being on our skin to getting into our bones to then residing and abiding in the marrow of our bones. So that kindness, loving kindness, not politeness. I'm not talking about politeness. Don't screw this up with that. I'm talking about the kindness that transforms you and the other person as you both experience it. Now keep being polite. That's important. But this is deeper. This is transformational to encounter. It literally opens your heart when you experience it and when you give it. The second one we want to work on is compassion, openness. People ask me, what do I mean by that? I mean openness, living with open to life. And there's much more. And the desire to alleviate another's suffering is compassion. Desire to alleviate my own suffering, which then I extend to you. The desire to alleviate your suffering. Shared joy. That is such a profound aspect of love. It is I can experience happiness because you're experiencing happiness. Anti-jealousy. And that kind of puts a thing on our nervous system that's like attached to envy. But I can get happy from your happiness. I can experience joy from your joy. I don't mean excitement. So in America, we kind of have like two stations, anger and excitement. So I'm not talking about excitement. I'm talking about transformational happiness. And the last one is equanimity, evenness of mind and heart. Stability of heart and mind. So my goal now is to develop a Maitreya Academy to train myself first and to train other people in how to embody the many, many, many characteristics, qualities, and skills of a bodhisattva in a world like we're now in professional settings, in home settings, in community settings. How do we do this? And there are skills that can all be learned. Everything's inherent here. But if I don't know I have it, I can't develop it. So it's both a combination of becoming aware of what I have and developing it to the point of mastery so that I am not intimidated when the lion roars. So that I am not afraid when the rhino comes out of the bush at me for upsetting the story, for challenging the paradigm. Otherwise we burn out or we give up. So I'm, and some people know this, I've been working on the curriculum, and that won't be what the curriculum is. I'm just doing this so I can think about it. I understand from some people here that after our last half day of mindfulness, some people started thinking about how could we get these clowns to move to Vashon? And thank you for your kind thoughts. And that conversation has come up since we've been here since yesterday. Also, there are people on Whidbey scheming in a good way with the same question, which is a wonderful situation to be in. Peggy and I are thinking that I'm calling it an academy, she's calling it which we used to call it a Bodhisattva mystery school. Because we've been trained in so many different things we want to share. We've been trained in shamanism, we know healing methods from Afghanistan, before it was Afghanistan, sacred dance, all kinds of things that we need to embody so that, I learned this from Thich Nhat Hanh, do you know if the quality of your presence is just so, you can transform another human being without saying a word? Now that's what I'm talking about. You understand what I'm saying here? We have a situation in which we cannot talk our way out of this mess. But we can transform our way out. We can heal our way out. And we can presence our way out. And we can all be trained in presencing. So that literally, you can one story is just coming up from Mother Teresa. I lived in Calcutta for a couple of years and worked in the ghetto there, which really upset my mother. But anyway, there was at a school near Mother Teresa's nunnery in Calcutta, there was kind of rioting. And somebody said, let's call Mother, as they called her. She walked in, appeared in the doorway, and everything stopped. She didn't say anything. She didn't. That's from a contemplative life. That's not from having some kind of super attitude of I'm okay? That's an open heart that knows how to send out its own energy in waves to affect the energy of other people. This is what we must learn. We must do everything else we do in terms of having a just society, a meaningful society, a respectful and responsible society of one another. And we have to do it from way deep. Or what will happen is what's happened before. Things will get all dressed up, and then the old patterns will reappear. You know this. It's like we were in Thailand for 3 years, and we came back to the United States, and it was like, hey, I thought we dealt with that. What's up with this craziness? Well, it has to get to what in Buddhism is called transformation at the base of consciousness. And until it's transformed at the very root of consciousness, it's not transformed. It's just packaged as transformation. It's just structured as relief. But it is not transformed. And we live in a moment of transformation, and what a opportunity we have. It's astounding. So if you're an artist, you're a poet, or you ever thought you wanted to be, a musician, a teacher, a healer, a dancer, I'm coming at all these humanity ones because we keep forgetting how important these things are. But if you're a scientist, a manufacturer who built an inventor, invent, but invent something that'll help us. Move into the next stage of what you might call high-level civilization. Enough living with the old level of civilization because it is toxic now. But remember, whatever civilization we create next, in its own time, it will also become toxic. It'll also become out of date. And some of us will want to defend it to the death. And this is why, again, contemplative practice is really, really important. Because in that process of practice, we're able to see that every invention has clay feet. Every human construct is just a construct. It lasts for a period of time, and then it's gone, just like us. Just like it's all biological. If we learn to look at things that way, learn to look at our social structures as the biological phenomenon and not ideological stuff, we can see everything comes and goes. Even what we create ourselves. It's okay to be proud of what we create. I'm not saying that. I'm saying don't be confused. And right now, we can see a lot of confusion of people who are heartbroken. Literally. There are people who are heartbroken that their story of being human is no longer the story. Mm-hmm. This morning at 3 o'clock or something, I had this. So I told Peggy, if and when President Obama is elected, shit's going to hit the fan. And last night I had an insight, which was, oh, that's not what's bad. That was bad. But the fact that he went through 8 years and did a phenomenal job is worse. Because we only thought one kind of person could do that job. And we all know what that person looked like. And now, whatever you think politically, we're on the verge of discovering maybe, it doesn't have to be a man who does that job. Oh my God! So, I would vote for Hillary for that reason alone. I'm interested in shifting the paradigm of what it means to be human, about who can lead and where. Because all politics is a mess. Right? Everywhere, every time, throughout all of history. But let's shake it up so that our children have a chance to live in a different civilization. And we can all say where we were when that high-level civilization started to emerge, and what we were doing. And if you're a baker, bake high-level civilization. And take care of one another.